Thank you very much for coming to our offices this evening. My name is Loren Schoenberg, and there's an old show business cliche which I will not use tonight, and that's the one that says you make up in quality what you're lacking in quantity. So I'm not going to use that old joke tonight because it's tired. But anyway, I'd like to thank you all very much for coming up, and with the weather reports and with the word about how it was supposed to be tonight with the typhoon and everything else coming, I'm glad that we came. This is also our first one post-summer. It's a very significant event for us. I'd like to welcome you all once again on behalf of myself, Loren Schoenberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Jazz Museum in Harlem. Wilhelmina Grant, who is our Executive Assistant. And one of the most important cogs in our wheel, Mr. Greg Thomas, who is the editor of Harlem Week and also the Harlem World, and also the co-producer of this series and a distinguished journalist in his own right. And I'll also say that in our audience we have one of our past guests, one of our past Harlem Speaks guests, Ms. Taja Murdoch, legendary dancer and historian. And in the back, a gentleman who has long been a pillar of jazz and will be our guest coming up in about a month or so, saxophonist Patience Higgins. And actually, I'm looking around the room, I know almost everybody in here tonight, so I can just go around and just introduce everybody because you're all members of our family here, and that's really, really wonderful. Before we start with Mr. Hernandez, I'll just tell one small anecdote, because I think it's what they call a representative anecdote. It makes sense in this context. When that music was playing, you know, when his record, it reminded me of something that happened to me once. 1982, I was playing the North Sea Jazz Festival in Holland, I guess, in the Netherlands. And I was with a band called Panama Francis's Band. And we were done with our set. And this might sound impossible to you, but at the North Sea Festival, they booked 3 or 4 bands playing at all times. There's like 4 or 5 venues and all these things. You remember, all these things are happening at the same time. So we come off the bandstand, and Miles Davis was playing like on the 2nd floor, and Sarah Vaughan was on the 4th floor, on the same floor where we were playing. Tito Puente's band was playing. So now this is the truth. So we're standing there trying to decide what we're going to go here. And we're debating, should we go hear Miles, or should we go hear Sarah, or should Hank Jones is playing over there? And the discussion went like this. Well, now, remember, over there is Tito's band playing. Well, should we go to hear Miles, or should we go hear Sarah? I don't know. I heard, Miles has a kind of a loud band, and it's kind of like rockish, and I don't know if I saw Sarah last year, and we danced right over to Tito Puente. We didn't even get anywhere near the. I mean, it was so funny. It was so natural what happened, and it brought back that essence, and that's one of the reasons that we're so happy to have the leader of the Spanish Harlem Orchestra here this evening, and also a distinguished composer for television, as you're going to find out if you don't know already. An award-winning composer, arranger, band leader, Mr. Oscar Hernandez.
Okay. Well, why don't we start back in the beginning? Where are you from originally?
Originally from the South Bronx. My parents, both are from Puerto Rico, and I guess they immigrated here in the 50s. And I was born in 1954. I'm born and raised in the South Bronx.
Okay. And what was your...
So 54, I'm sorry to interrupt, that means
Sure.
I just made the big 5-0 recently.
And when would you get there?
You're still walking around, still walking,
I can't believe it myself, actually. It's like, wow, it seems like yesterday I started in this business, and here I am 30-something years later.
Okay. So you were born in the Bronx and you grew up in the Bronx.
That's correct.
Describe the musical and cultural scene that you were nurtured in to lay a foundation for what became this great 30-year career.
Well, back in the day, I remember being part of a lot of the social events that were going on. I come from a big family. I have 10 brothers and sisters. I'm one of 11. So, I was the next to youngest. So obviously my older brothers and sisters were out there jamming in all the parties and social events, social gatherings at a time, and listening to this music, which was, as far as Latin music is concerned, they were listening to the music that was happening during that period, which is mainly people like Tito Puente, Tito Rodriguez, Great Machito Orchestra, Eddie Palmieri, Ray Barretto, and that's just to name a few. There were so many people that were part of the music panorama that existed during that time, and it was a rich time, I think, to be brought up in as far as music is concerned. I tell all the musicians, my musicians friends of mine that we kind of grew up together, says, gee, all those years we took for granted, we realized were the good old days, because it certainly has changed. But and then as I got older, I got turned on to listening to jazz and realized what an incredible music jazz is, and became a huge jazz buff. Being a pianist, started listening to the guys who were setting the pace as far as jazz is concerned. People obviously like Herbie Hancock, McCoy Tyner, Chick Corea, Keith Jarrett, and then going back and listening to people like Bud Powell and obviously Charlie Parker and Whitney Kelly, Red Garland, so on and so forth, and absorbing, exactly, Dizzy Gillespie, absorbing the jazz tradition as much as I could, but always being within the Latin scene. So there was a lot of music. I'm talking about the 60s, the late 60s, early 70s for me.
How did the piano actually come into your life? How did you actually just start making music yourself? How did that happen?
Well, actually, I started off playing trumpet at the local boys club in the Bronx, and I remember we used, back in the day, the boys club used to start off with bugle in the marching band, and then finally, when you kind of did well, they gave you a trumpet. So I remember going to my first lessons with the trumpet teacher, and he said, "Oh, this kid's got talent, it's going to be good." Because I was picking up the stuff in terms of reading the music and picking up the syncopations and being able to kind of do well with the written music. But after like a year or so, I was struggling in terms of embouchure. Trumpet is a difficult instrument, and some people have a natural ability in terms of what they call chops, in terms of ability to play, especially high notes and stuff like that. So I was 12 at the time, and 13, I guess. He suggested I switch to piano. And fortunately for me, my oldest brother was a superintendent where we lived, and it was like a huge building with a lot of apartments in the Bronx, probably like 100 apartments. And he fixed a lot of the basement apartments, and we kind of had our own little clubhouse. So it was a fortunate thing for me. And somebody gave him a piano. So in one of the rooms we had a piano, so I started doodling around and trying to emulate the music I was listening to, mainly the salsa music that I would hear my brothers and sisters listen to. And so I started like listening to Eddie Palmieri and Charlie Palmieri, who were the guys in the forefront in terms of Latin piano during that time. And that's how it started.
Let me ask you a question, because you just mentioned two legends, one of whom still very, very much with us, one who passed away long before, the Palmieri brothers. What I've heard people talk about Charlie, they call him like the Thelonious Monk of Latin jazz or something like that, and that's an analogy that comes from the jazz side of it. Do you think that that's a correct thing to say, or do you think it's just worthy saying that he's Charlie Palmieri and he doesn't need to be linked to anyone? Or can you see anything in that cliche?
I think probably you're talking about
Eddie?
Eddie Palmieri would
Passed.
be more. No, Charlie passed. Eddie's
Right.
still with us.
Right.
I think Eddie's more. I don't remember hearing that, but if I would have to make an analogy, I would say, yeah, you can make a correlation between Eddie Palmieri, the way he plays, and Thelonious Monk. There's a kind of roar, but within that rawness to their style of playing, there's a sophistication that existed, and there's something that's is very important in terms of rhythmically that's going on. So I think the analogy is with Eddie Palmieri, yes.
And let me ask another question. For a lot of folks in America, the first time that they came across like a really popular what they call Latin band. And I'd like to talk about these terms, because I've heard from Sam Burtis and other people about how some people feel about the term salsa, and some people like it, some people don't like it, and, you know, and how Tito Puente felt about it and all this. The name I'm talking about is Xavier Cugat, which was, you know, this big band that, you know, became very popular, and I think to a lot of folks played up a lot of stereotypes. You know what I mean? And I'm wondering what your take is on it, and what was the take of the generation before you on the great success of Cugat? Was it thought to be totally commercial and not for real, or was it a combination?
Well, without a doubt, because my experience is I heard the name, I knew who he was, and obviously he had some success, especially in Americana, so to speak.
Right.
But it wasn't the music that everybody I knew was dancing to or listening to. So it's obviously, it correlates to what the stereotype of Latin music is. It's not my idea of what Latin music, although he obviously had something to do with the popularity of Latin music, and it's not like you can't even begin to compare like Xavier Cugat and Machito. You know, you listen to the Machito Orchestra of the 1949, you listen to those records and you just go like, wow. I mean, and I have people that I know that were present during those years, and a good friend of mine, Marty Scheller, told me, and even Charlie Palmieri, actually, Charlie Palmieri, I remember him telling me that he would, you know, or was it Marty? I think Marty told me, and Patience, I know you must know what I'm talking about, but the first time he heard Machito, he went to the Palladium, which was the club. It was like Birdland, but in terms of Latin music, it was the Palladium. And he heard Tito Puente come on, he said they sounded great. And he heard Tito Rodriguez come on, and they sounded great, because both of those bands, during their heyday, they were just awesome. Then Machito comes up, and Machito had all these old guys in the band. And he said, gee, what are these old guys going to do? And he says as soon as they started, bang, he just like, wow. I mean, it was incredible, because of the feel and the way they laid down the rhythm. There was something, and you know, Latin music, for me, I love it to death. I mean, there's a certain, it's one of the most amazing musics in the world. I mean, there's something about it I can't explain it. But the way he explains, you know, the Machito sound, and if you listen to those old records, it's really evident. You know, Tito Puente's band was great, but I think there's a certain uniqueness to the Machito sound that was amazing, and you know, the records are a testament to that.
I'm gonna go.
If I'm being long-winded, cut me off. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
No.
Really, it's fine. I'm going to go back to your early days of playing the piano. But first, since you mentioned Machito, when did you first hear the Machito with Charlie Parker recordings? And was that around 49? Because, I mean, those are some of the most amazing recordings I've ever heard. The way, I don't want to put words in my mouth, but the way Charlie Parker adapted himself. I mean, he's genius, but it was just incredible. It sounded like he was almost born in that, because he was able to adapt his style so well, it seemed.
Well, I mean, everybody knows Charlie Parker was in fact a genius, but I mean, it was such beauty and passion and just everything that he played. I mean, he was amazing. So I think you could put him in any type of music and just go wow. So I mean, that's just what that's about. I think I don't think it's anything more than that. It's just the genius of, you know, Bird.
Okay. And when did do you remember when you first heard some of those recordings and what you thought of it?
I think probably in my 19, 20 years old, I had friends of mine that were at that time turning me on to all kind of stuff. You know, I met somebody named Andy Gonzalez, who's one of the great bass players of Latin music. And Andy used to have a house in the Bronx where his parents lived upstairs, and him and his brother shared an apartment downstairs. And that was the hang back in the day. So all the musicians would go there and just like, you know, smoke some weed and listen to music till 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and they had an amazing record collection. which I didn't have, and they had all this knowledge that I didn't have, so they were exposing me to so much music, and they were huge jazz buffs and aficionados, so they, as they say, hit me to so much music in terms of Latin and jazz, and that's probably when I heard the Machito with Bird.
Okay.
And it's funny because later on I did get to play in my early years, play with Machito, and it was an incredible experience playing with that band. Obviously, it wasn't the same anymore in his later years. It was good, but a lot of those musicians, just like listening to Duke Ellington, in his heyday, and whatever it is, 20 years past his prime or whatever. So I think that analogy can be made. And the most amazing thing was Machito literally lived in a second floor walk up on Rosedale Avenue in the Bronx. I mean, which I couldn't believe. I'm saying Machito. I mean, it's like, this is where he lives? I mean, it's like, it's kind of, sad, because these are figures that you certainly, are I consider kind of musical royalty, and you think that they'd be doing better than that.
I just want to follow up on that.
Okay, sure.
I'd like to be a little more explicit about that. Now, we know that Louis Armstrong chose to live in Corona, in Queens, right? And that he chose to live there, even though he had a lot more money. He could have chosen to live somewhere else if he had chosen to, but that was his choice. He wanted to live in that house, he wanted to live in that neighborhood with real people and the kids next door and all that kind of stuff. Is what you're inferring about Machito is that he didn't actually have enough money from what he made to actually live in any other place than a walk-up?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Right. Okay.
Unlike Tito Puente, with Tito, especially, I mean, God bless him, in his last 15 or 20 years of his life, especially with the Santana recording, that he made so much money from that, and he really became successful past his musical prime, in a sense. And I'm talking about economically successful, where he was able to have a home and live well, and he made money. He wasn't filthy rich, but he lived well. I mean, when you think of Machito, I mean, of all these people, I think it's, they should have been doing a lot better than they were in terms of, economically.
Now, I'd like to follow up on that. Now, did he had hit records, and was he the composer of them? Was he hooked up well with the publishing companies and with all that stuff?
Those were the days where people were being ripped off by
Morris Levy?
Yeah, by all those people in the record business, and they really didn't know, they weren't business savvy in terms of what they needed to be able to do, to achieve in terms of what they deserved monetarily. So I think that's part of it. I mean, he wasn't, as a composer, he wasn't a prolific composer by any means, but his claim to fame was, the incredible band that he had and the music that he put out there, and more than as a composer.
Did you get to meet Mario Bauza?
Yes, I got to meet Mario also later on, because I mean, when I met Mario, he was already like 70 years old or something like that, and still incredible personality and an incredible musician. So was fortunate to be able to play with Machito and Mario Bauza, and actually I played with Tito also. So I was very fortunate in that sense that although it was the tail end of their careers, I was able to play with them.
Great.
So back to your early days in terms of piano playing. So you started 12, 13, and you were kind of just tinkering, you'd say, in the beginning. Would that be accurate? And if that's the case, when did you really get serious about the piano and about music becoming a career?
Well, I just kind of got caught up in the whole musical, I guess kind of life took me down this musical path, so to speak. It's not something that I thought about aspiring to do, and people, even when I graduated from high school, people said, well, so what do you want to be? I'm going like, Gee, I have no idea, you know. But I was fortunate enough that when I was 15, 16, I started playing with local bands, neighborhood bands. And I think when I was about 16, I had a friend of mine, one of the guys who I was playing with, was playing with one of the professional bands. He told me, I didn't need a piano player. I'm saying, really, but I never read a chart or. So he took me down, and I remember screwing up the music pretty bad, and the band leader said, no, don't worry about it, take the music home and come back, you know. So he gave me the opportunity, and I was, I think, talented enough, I guess, looking back, that I took the music home and learned it. The next time I was in. So, and by the time I was 18, I was playing with, I think, again, very fortunate and blessed, the most popular band at that time. We're talking about 1971, 72. At that time, he was like, people think of Mark Anthony, who's the most popular these days in terms of commercial success. At that time, it was a young singer named Ismael Miranda, and we had a hit record. The name of the band was La Revelación, a Revelation translation. And he was like a young 23-year-old, had the hottest band. He had great musicians, and I was fortunate to be able to be playing with him because we were working literally 5 to 6, 7 days a week. And at that time, there were clubs all over New York. So we're talking about we'd be doing anywhere from 4 to 7 or 8, 9 gigs a week, because sometimes we play double on Friday, double on Saturday, sometimes double on Sunday. And it certainly was a unique time in terms of the music, because I think it was at the peak of, I guess, the development of that style of music, I think, which was the 70s. So I think that I was fortunate to be part of that era, in a sense. So, lo and behold, I was 18, making money, and I think it was about 24 years old that I decided I was playing, and I kind of felt empty in a sense that I wasn't doing enough with my life, because I wasn't really practicing or studying. So I went to college, and actually, it's funny because being brought up in the South Bronx with poor parents, and college was never mentioned in my house. You know, I mean, we were fortunate to graduate from high school, and that's all was asked of us. And so there was always this fear of college. And then when I went to college, I found it really easy. And
Were you 24 at the time?
Yes, I mean, so I was older, but I mean, I was wondering, like, why I had all this fear about going to college, thinking like, am I college material?
Right.
So I'm glad I did it, and I got a degree. I went to City College. I got a degree in music.
Which branch?
CCMI, 138.
Oh, City College.
I went to City College at that time.
Was John Lewis there then? Or was that
John Lewis was there,
Wow.
that's correct. John Lewis was there, and later on Ron Carter was there. So, but by that time, it was funny because I was playing with Ray Barretto, and speaking of the North Sea Jazz Festival, I got to do the North Sea in 1981 with Ray, and so I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of, you know, what an incredible festival and all the music that you see at those festivals in Europe. But I was playing with Ray, and I had classmates going, well, what are you doing here? I'm saying, well, I guess I'm, you know, studying music. And I always studied privately so I can better myself. But
Who'd you study with?
I studied with some classical teachers that were recommended by, you know, professors in the school, and mainly classical because I needed to learn how to play the piano in terms of from a technical point of view, to try and play it correctly, which I had never learned because I was basically self-taught in a sense. But and in my case, just about everything they taught me in college in terms of well, I mean, not from the historical point of view in terms of music, but everything else I basically knew. So, so that's why I tell students, you know, you can study all you want, but there's no experience is the greatest teacher in a sense. And playing with musicians who were better than me always, and who I would try to emulate and would learn from. And I was in contact with a lot of the great arrangers of that time, who I would, learn from and ask them questions and look at their scores and in terms of being an arranger and stuff like that.
Excuse me, this is after college?
This
Oh,
was
even during.
before, during, and
Okay.
even after.
Okay.
Sorry.
We're going to come back to the arrangers, but you said something about the 70s being the period where this style, this music that you're talking about really developed. Could you go into some more detail about that? Name the style, describe its elements.
Well, the 70s, I think, is when the term salsa came into being, because it was never never known as salsa music. It was always Latin music, and I think, I don't know who actually was the first to coin that phrase, but I think the result was that it helped in terms of making it a commercial success. So you had, at that time, the big commercial success was the Fania All-Stars. And the Fania Records was they were like the Motown of Latin music. And they put out an incredible amount. I mean, their catalog to this day, I think, is probably one of the biggest catalogs that exist in all of music. They put out so much music, it's amazing. So you had a lot of the major stars, and even substars, so to speak, who were on that label, and I think it was the peak of what that music was about in terms of, they called it salsa, is commercial success, and all the groups and the important groups that went on to influence not only here, but in Latin America a lot, and obviously in Europe, and there were so many styles within the style of salsa itself. So it was a great time for the music, no doubt about it.
I have a question for you. At that time in jazz music, there was a period now they call fusion. Some people call it confusion, but there was this fusion period in which the rock influence, all that music that happened in the 60s and 70s, bled over into a form of jazz, and it was something that had to be contended. But did the same thing happen in Latin music? Did the rock element bleed in some sense?
Without a doubt. And there was, being a product of New York, and New York was, I think, place where it went on to influence everywhere else, I think. So being brought up in New York as a Latino, you obviously were listening to not only jazz, but you were listening to the commercial radio stations and R&B and pop and all of that somehow integrated into the music. You have things like the Boogaloo, which were obviously R&B's influence in Latin music. So and then you had all kind of byproducts in terms of fusion aspects to the music, as you say. I can't remember anything specifically, but I think Latin music incorporating some guitar and some synthesizers later on and stuff like that.
You mentioned the word salsa before, and the actual translation of that word is
Sauce.
right, sauce. So I've heard that among some Latin jazz musicians or Latin musicians that the feeling about the term was almost like the way like the Dizzy Gillespie and these people later came to feel about the term bebop, which was that it was a commercial term that did a lot for them, and they got a lot of press, and the records came out and they wore a funny hat and all that kind of stuff. And as they got older, they felt that it was a tremendously limiting term, because people would say, well, you call this music bebop because it came from bebop, from an interval and a rhythm. And they say, well, and people say, how seriously can you take a music called bebop? I mean, you don't call Beethoven's music ba-ba-ba-bum music, because it's ba-ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-ba-bum. They say, how seriously can you take something called ba-ba-ba-bum? And in the same sense, I'm wondering, salsa, sauce, if in some sense it was good commercially, but maybe for a composer, for a band leader, you might think that your music is actually deeper and better than that. I don't know. wasn't, is this something that I'm imagining that people felt, or was there some
Well, I think that
reality to it?
you might have some people that have that take on it. Me personally, doesn't bother me. I know it bothered Tito Puente, but I don't necessarily agree. I think that if people want to call it that and it's going to make it successful, I think the important thing is that people have turned on to the music and appreciate the value of the music. I mean, in my case with Spanish Harlem Orchestra, I feel I've paid my dues in this business by a lot over 30 years, and I've been fortunate and blessed to play with some of the best people, and not for anything, I'm really good at what I do, and I say that without any ego. I think part of it is being serious and trying to be as professional as I can, and having worked with a lot of great people that I have. So if people also want to think that I'm the greatest thing since hot water, you know what I mean? I'm not going to say, no. I feel that, I've worked hard at this, and, give it to me now that I'm alive and that I'm working hard, Really, so whatever's going to make the music happen, I never heard about that as far as bebop. To me, I love it. When I think of bebop, I just love it. So it doesn't.
Sure. No, but I would just in later years, some of the creators of it wish that it hadn't been just given that name. But you see, your perspective, I have to say, as a musician, as a pianist, and as a band leader to yourself, might not be the same perspective as a mass audience. Or even frankly, all of our people here. I mean, the serious people who love music or love the arts and come out to talk about it and want to hear about it, and that's a relatively rare slice of the population. Most people really aren't interested that seriously about it.
Well, they say musicians, I have a friend of mine says that musicians hear music in color as opposed to everybody else black and white. I never heard that expression, but until I heard that from him, and I said, interesting. So, those serious music fans, you don't necessarily have to be a musician, I think have a deep appreciation of music as an art, and good music especially. And when you talk about jazz, and for me Latin music, and obviously not all jazz and not all Latin, but I mean what we think of, good Latin music and good jazz music, then it's a beautiful art form, and certainly one to be appreciated, and it's important that we keep putting it out there and educate and do all the things necessary to make sure that it lives on.
You mentioned before your orchestra, the Spanish Harlem Orchestra, and I was wondering if you could take your story from where we were talking, all these great bands that you played with, and then going back to school and all this kind of stuff, and start aiming it towards the creation of this orchestra. And how did that all evolve, and how did your own career take that turn?
Well, it was strictly luck. It wasn't devised, it wasn't planned or anything like that. But now that it's here, I firmly believe that. I mean, I think the older you get, the more spiritual you become, and that God has put this in my path for a certain reason. I deeply believe that. And it's funny that with the Spanish Harlem Orchestra, first of all, it's a great band. I mean, I'm really proud when you see the band. It's an awesome band. I mean, we totally get up there, and these are great musicians that really have absorbed the tradition and the legacy of this music and know how to play it. And I lost my thread for a second.
Basically, how did you
form it?
Right.
How did it start?
Well, no, the point I was trying to make is that the way the industry has changed, or the business has changed, whereas 30 years ago it was commonplace to kind of see a band like the Spanish Harlem Orchestra. But we've received and have achieved a lot of success in 2 years that we've existed, and I think it's part of the mediocrity that exists out there, that people say, wow, these guys are awesome. But it's because music in general has become so mediocre, and what they push on the radio stations, commercial radio stations, is really sad. So as a result, we've been fortunate to develop an underground following because it's been a struggle to get them to play us on commercial radio stations. But we've been fortunate enough that people recognize the quality enough that we've developed an underground following to keep us working. I mean, in 2 years we've been to Europe 7 times, which is pretty amazing. And we've been to Hong Kong, we've been to Japan, and gotten a lot of critical acclaim across the board. Now, it wasn't done intentionally, honestly, Loren. I mean, somebody came to me with the idea of this project, and I'm a firm believer that I put the stuff out there all the time. I just put it out and let it be what it's going to be and let it grow. And I think a lot of those good things that you do, somehow they come back to you. And that's the case here. To give you a story that's kind of analogy, I produced a CD for a friend of mine, which was a labor of love. I didn't make a lot of money. And it actually, and this is an exaggeration, but it's the truth, it sold 3 CDs. But it got a great review in the New York Times. And Paul Simon read the review and said, hey, get me this CD. And he heard the CD and he said, who did this? And based on that CD getting a great review and me putting it out as a labor of love, he called me, and I was the musical director of the Cape Man, and formed a great association with Paul.
Wow.
So that's an example of putting stuff out there, and I think that things come back to you in that sense. And I think the same thing with the Spanish Harlem Orchestra. Originally it was just a concept album that we said, well, let's put it out, and it literally exploded. So I mean, it wasn't that we had, and that's the way things happen. You don't really, you can say, I'm going to make a commercial album and it's going to, you know, you just do it, and we've been fortunate and blessed.
Can you make a bridge for us between your life in the Bronx and East Harlem and El Barrio? I mean, was there interplay there? Did you hang out there?
Well, I mean, of course, when we were back in the day, when I was 16, 17, and 18, and although I was in the Bronx, I mean, there were social events happening in the barrio. We call it the barrio. You know, East Harlem or Spanish Harlem. And I had family that lived there, so we'd go to parties there. Later on, I would wind up rehearsing in Spanish Harlem on numerous occasions, being part of the social clubs that existed. There weren't a lot of clubs per se, other than social clubs that I can remember anyway, big clubs. But being part of the cultural explosion that was happening for Latinos and obviously for, you know, Black Americans in Harlem, but part of being part of that scene, not directly because I didn't live in Spanish Harlem, but it's part of my heritage. I mean, how many Puerto Ricans are from, you know, Spanish Harlem? So that's the connection.
Okay. So tell us some of the people who are crucial to the formation of the Spanish Harlem Orchestra. I know that there's a producer. I remember reading some stuff online.
Well, Aaron Levinson is a producer. He's from Philadelphia. He's the one who originally called me with the concept. And I said, well, I mean, when he called me with the concept, I said, that's a piece of cake for me. That's what I do all the time. What he's asking me to do in terms of producing. First of all, producing a record means, from my end, because I'm a record producer, means being able to ascertain what the concept of that particular project is going to be, or in this case, what the record's going to be in terms of conceptually. And then making it happen, from choosing the musicians, from working out a budget, from choosing a studio, from choosing the arrangers. In my case, from musical directing, that's also part of what I do. Formulating the actual songs and how they're going to be done, and choosing who's going to sing. So when he called me with the concept, I said, yeah, perfect, let's go. And we discussed, you know, the concept, and went back and forth in terms of the material, because that's also important. You have to choose a material that goes along with the concept that you want to put out. So we chose the material. I picked the musicians, he picked the studio, and went in, recorded it, and like I said, we've been doing really great since then.
You mentioned the legendary name in American music, Paul Simon, a little while ago, and that wonderful show based on a historic event. Wondering if you could talk about your association with him and what was it actually like, and being the musical director for a Broadway show with an original score. Was that the first time that you did anything remotely like that, and how did you actually do it?
Well, it was an incredible experience, and I tell people to this day I earned my doctorate degree in musical theater because I had no knowledge of musical theater. I mean, it's not like you're talking about a kid from the South Bronx who never went to a Broadway play. I mean, basically. And so it was pretty amazing that I kind of fell into this, and I also realized that that was one of the things that made me realize that I'm really good at what I do. Being able to handle a situation, especially the enormity of that situation, because I was in charge of 23 musicians and 45 people in the cast. And I can't even tell you, I mean, I didn't think about it. I thought about it, I probably would have got scared and ran. But I just did, you know, it's like I just plowed ahead because it was in front of me. And working with Paul, I got to say, he's been criticized to death for a lot of reasons. And, you know, some people say he's raped the music in terms of, like, you know, stealing from other cultures, exactly. I mean, but as far as I'm concerned, you know, he worked with Lady Smith Black Mambazo, and nobody knew who they were in their own country. So, I mean, you know, with me, he was generous, he was very giving. I mean, he's not perfect, he has his own idiosyncrasies or whatever, but, you know, he told me, hey, get the people you want. And let me tell you something, it was so gratifying to look in that pit and see a bunch of Latinos on a Broadway stage. I can't even tell you. I mean, it makes my hair stand up. Because you go to any Broadway pit, you ain't gonna see too many blacks or Latinos. I mean, we're like, you can count them on one hand. And that's a shame. And the other shame about the play not doing well, and I don't know whoever, if you saw it or not, but it certainly didn't deserve the fate that it got. There's no doubt in my mind. I've been to a number of Broadway plays during that time, before and after, and I can tell you, yeah, it had its problems, but it had a lot of incredible things that, you know, it didn't deserve the fate it got. So I think, definitely, I think it was sabotaged. I'm privy to certain things that happened that I know was sabotage. So, but one of the things that really bothered me was, as a Latino, is, and I didn't realize that at the time. You know, I had my older brother who was like,
Can I say pissed off? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
he was pissed beyond the end that the fact that the play was going down, and I was going like, you know, like, it is what it is. What are you going to do? And he says, no, you don't understand.
What did he object to?
Well, he felt like there was a lot of great things about it. And the fact that he was telling me, you don't understand, your nieces and nephews, and anybody you see that's Latino, go see that show and they see themselves out on that stage. Whereas you go to any other show, and as a Latino, as a black person, as a minority, you go see Les Mis, a Phantom, and there's nothing as a kid that you look up at that stage that you can relate to. Nothing. I mean, zero. This is my opinion now. All right? So, the thing was, as on Wednesdays during matinees, we would have inner city kids come see the show. And it was so gratifying because after the show we would have meet and greet, and they would stay and they would ask us questions, and it was so gratifying because, like I said, kids from me, I never had that opportunity. I mean, you know, being brought up in the South Bronx, who had money to go see a Broadway show, especially as expensive as those tickets are. So that's one of the things that kind of, you know, hurt in terms of, you know, the play not being successful.
But I'm curious, what was it And again, you know, we are recording these things for our archives, you know, well, I'm just saying that, you know, for all this stuff. And it was about 10 years ago, wasn't it?
No, I think it's about 7 years ago now. 97.
Could you just give us just real briefly, just and maybe even for some folks in the audience, just a real quick sketch of what the story was about, and what the Cape Man was, and then what was it that your brother actually objected to?
Well, no, he was just angry that the play was not.
Was sabotaged.
Right, exactly.
I got you. I'm sorry. I
No,
misunderstood.
that's what he was angry about.
I got you.
And the fact that that the play was the show was closing.
Gotcha.
Basically, that's what it was, and that that it didn't. Gee.
You know, the
Storyline.
same thing just happened. There's another wonderful show by Tony Kushner, the guy who did Angels in America, called Caroline or Change. And I saw it down at the Public Theater. It came to Broadway, and I think the basic feeling is a similar kind of in the business kind of sabotage took place, because this show was almost too good to survive, and people didn't want to survive for some reason, maybe because it made everything else seem so sad. But and that's closing now, and people can't believe it. It's closing.
Well, the thing is that there's a stereotype in terms of what a Broadway show should be, and this wasn't your stereotypical Broadway show. It was very different. It was a unique voice, which I thought was the beauty of it. I mean, just the set design alone was awesome. I mean, I sat there, I conducted every single show. So, and I had people who literally came up to me and said, during intermission, "You know what's wrong with this show? It's too good for Broadway." I mean, that's the reaction I would get. That's not to say that it didn't have its problems. Believe me, it had its problems, and I understand why certain things didn't work about it. And Paul was wrong about certain things. I'm not, saying that was the case. And he made his mistakes, and mistakes were made. But that notwithstanding, it received, the fate that the shipment received.
And in a nutshell, could you just tell us what the show was about?
Well, the story was the Cape Man. I guess those New Yorkers must know. 1956, 57, Salvador Agron was a 16-year-old kid who was part of a gang. The landscape of New York back in the day there was a lot of gangs. He was part of a gang called the Vampires. He had just turned 16, and he was part of this gang, and he used to walk around with a cape. And as you know, in New York, they had turf wars and stuff like that, rival gangs. So he was in a park, and in walked a bunch of white kids, and they got into a fight, and he stabbed two of them and killed them. Obviously, it's horrific. There's no doubt about it. There's no denying that. What the crime he committed. But the thing is that he spent 20 years in jail. Don't forget, he had just turned 16, so he's a little kid. He's basically, and there's you can't make an excuse for that. I mean, it's totally wrong. But he rehabilitated himself in jail, educated himself, and served his 20-something years, got out, and then Paul dealt with should there be redemption involved in somebody's life who was a kid, and is it possible for somebody to redeem themselves from such a tragic event? And that was basically what the story was about. And he didn't take one side or the other, but not saying, whether it was right or wrong in terms of his portrayal of what the story was. It just made for an interesting story. But part of the controversy it created at the time was that they saying Paul Simon was glorifying crime or glorifying such a horrific, violent event.
I mean, haven't people ever heard of a writer named Shakespeare? I mean, what a naive comment, and yet nonetheless that was the rap that the show got, but they don't talk about Hamlet. It's insane, or most of TV today. Now, did you do the orchestrations?
I did some of the orchestrations, but mainly Paul was, we kind of worked, the band worked a lot in terms of rehearsing, finding different sounds that we would all collectively come up with, and actually Paul had a lot of input into what they were. but the actual classical orchestrations were done by a gentleman named Stanley Silverman.
You put that band together, this dream band that you wanted for that show. You have your own Spanish Harlem Orchestra. You've played with all these people over the years. Are there a core of players, rhythm section, horn players, trombone, saxophone, that you use in all your projects, like just some of your key guys? And who are they?
Well, without a doubt, there's a lot of good musicians. Being involved in the music scene, you constantly cross paths with certain musicians, whether it be the studio or backing up a singer or doing a show. The rhythm section that I use is Pablo Chino Nunez. These are the percussionists because they're great percussionists. Bobby Allende, Robert Allende, and George Delgado, George Gonzalez. Those are the guys. Marquinhos, there's a few gentlemen on bass. Ruben Rodriguez has played with us, recorded both our records, and we have a young gentleman named Maximo Rodriguez who's also on bass with us now. The horn section is Pete Nader, John Walsh, Raul Agras, Jimmy Bosch, and Dan Reagan. And we have three singers. Ray de la Paz, who's the most well known, and he's had a career in his own right as a great singer in this business, and is as good as it gets as far as salsa singing. He's just, incredible. And we have two younger guys, one Willie Torres and Marco Bermudez.
The Buena Vista Social Club, caused a big sensation when that film came out, and they shone the spotlight on these great musicians in Cuba, who had been big stars, and there they were, and then they had a great career after, and then they came back. I've always wondered why, there's a film like that made, and it won all these awards, and record albums, and all that kind of stuff, and yet here in the States, probably within 3 blocks of here, we've got so many great musicians about who they could make a Harlem Social Club, or an East Harlem Social Club kind of film, or a documentary, and I'm wondering are there these great older musicians that you were talking about that you met when you were younger who are still around and who played and that we should include in our series here and that people should be talking to? Are there any left?
Well, Ray Barretto, I think Eddie Palmieri, Chocolate Menteros, the guys who are
Is he the trumpet player?
Player, yeah.
I have a question. Wasn't there a trumpet player who they called Vanilla also, who was at the same time?
Chocolate?
No, but I thought that
Oh no, was there a counterpart named Vanilla? No, not that I know of.
Okay. Speaking of redeeming themselves, I'm gonna redeem myself with that one at some point because I got something in my mind and clearly I'm wrong. But okay, go ahead, man.
Some other people still around.
Well, with regard to the Buena Vista Social Club, I think it was incredible, and God bless Ry Cooder for making the movie. People criticize him, but if you see the movie, it's touching to see these guys who are in their 80s and receive their 15 minutes, of fame, and it's so touching. I can't tell you. See him walking through New York City, going like, "Man, I've died and got to heaven and come back, and they live their dream."
I'm talking about the Buena Vista Social Club and how wonderful those folks got their moments.
Yeah, and I said,
sweet.
They sold 2 million copies, which is amazing for a record like that, which is a non-commercial record. So it goes to show you that there is, an economic viability in this music. However you want to, people say, no, but it's not commercial, and these guys were in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s, so it's pretty amazing, and I think it's, like I said, God bless Ry Cooder for doing it. I know he got criticized to death, but, watching the film, tears came to my eyes, welled up, just thinking about how beautiful that these guys got their moment, and they do play. The essence of the music that they play is what the essence of this music is about. There's no doubt about it. It's a different style of music, but that's where the music comes from.
And what is that essence?
It's like listening to swing music or jazz, the jazz in the 30s and 20s and 30s, and, Satchmo before, it went to Diz and Bird, and then listening to how the music evolved. Well, that's the essence of what this music is, listening to Buena Vista Social Club and listening to those guys. So, and I tell all the musicians that it's important that they listen to the roots of the music, because it gives you the right perspective in terms of how the music evolved, and unless you really absorb that, you won't be able to play this music the way it should be played.
Okay, that's a very good point you make, and it's one that folks in music pedagogy, jazz pedagogy, often emphasize that it's really important. Of course, Marsalis is known for that. To have the sweep of the music under your belt is
You can't know where you're going.
Extremely important. I mean, it was, like when I first heard Herbie Hancock back in the early 70s, and then I realized, well, who was Herbie listening to? And obviously he was listening to Bill Evans, he was listening to Wynton Kelly, to Red Garland, and those people like that. And you go back and listen to them, you go, oh, wow. And who were they listening to? Well, Fats Waller, James P. Johnson, Willie Lyon Smith, and so on and so forth, and all the great heroes of jazz piano. So for me, unless you really have listened to that, and as a musician, have kind of made an effort to absorb the tradition and natural evolution of the music, you're not going to be able to play it, really, really well.
okay. One thing I want to say is I'm very proud that the magazine that I'm editor of, Harlem World, had a review of the first recording of the Spanish Harlem Orchestra in it, and in it I learned a lot about the musicians that you have in your group. And is it Ray de la
Paz?
The writer of this piece, she just praised him to high heavens because he's legendary. And I learned, and I before I edited the piece, I said I gotta listen to this, and I fell in love with it. So I'd like you to talk about your first recording, leading to your second one also.
Well, the first recording, as I said, was just a concept record that we decided to put together.
What's the name of it?
The name of it was Un Gran Día en el Barrio, a great day in the barrio, basically.
Similar to like a Great Day.
Exactly, which a great day in Harlem, which is represented by the incredible picture, photograph.
Right behind it.
Yeah, it's amazing. So that was the title of the CD, and it was magic because everything fell into place. And you know what? Like I said, there are certain things that have become important that actually have taken a life of its own in terms of our particular sound. It's really piqued a lot of people's interest because of the name of the band, and I wish I could say I was the one who thought of putting the name Spanish Harlem Orchestra. But the fact that it's piqued a lot of people's interest and people want to know, it's been a great thing for us because it takes on importance even more so than just the music. There's an added dimension involved. It's like, well, what is Spanish Harlem and the cultural development, and then I go on to in most of the interviews I tell people, well, yeah, Spanish Harlem, just as Harlem was an extremely important in the development culturally for Black Americans, so was Spanish Harlem for Latinos. So that same analogy can be made, and for us, it's been a blessing.
I just want to mention that that's something that at the Jazz Museum in Harlem is we're defining what our purpose is and the story we're going to tell. That's something that we really want to talk about, and something about the history of the music. I mean, I saw a TV show, a wonderful TV show on PBS. They have this series called A Walk Through Brooklyn, A Walk Through Harlem. They had A Walk Through Harlem, which is a great show. But guess what? Guess where they didn't set one foot? Spanish Harlem. On this episode that I saw. And my point was that I was just going to make was that I was talking to Vosa Rivers today from the Harlem Arts Alliance, and we were talking about the way that we're going to talk about the history of the music, and we were looking at a picture of James Reese Europe, who they always talk about. James Reese Europe was this great band leader who was the band leader for Irene and Berlin Castle in the 19 teens and all this kind of stuff, and took a band, played in the First World War in Europe, came back, got stabbed by a crazy drummer, and that was it. And he died tragically, and it would make a great film, this man's story. Well, anyway, Rosa told me that that there were several Latin musicians in the band, even from those days,
Right.
from Spanish Harlem and from different areas that actually what wasn't called Spanish Harlem back at that time, back in the 19 teens, but there were a whole bunch of Caribbean and Latin musicians in that band. And I just wanted to second your comment about the fact that that's part of the story that's not often told, and one that we want to tell, and one that we will look for guidance as to how we should do it.
Gee, I mean, just,
That was kind of a statement, that wasn't a question so much, right? I just couldn't let it go by.
well, I mean, it's really important to touch on the importance of, the cultural development in Harlem and obviously Spanish Harlem. And that's been an important thing for us because we get to touch upon it to a lot of people. Believe it or not, I ran across a couple of people told me, oh, I didn't know there was a Spanish Harlem. I knew there was a Harlem, but Spanish Harlem? The correlations are so similar, I mean, they go hand in hand, so it's good to be able to have kind of accessibility to that history and to be able to put it out there and inform people. And in our particular case, with the Spanish Harlem Orchestra, like I said, I feel really blessed because, I tell people, well, it's not, in terms of the cultural, historical significance, it's not a bunch of flunkies who took on this name. It's the real deal guys who've absorbed this tradition. And although it was by accident, I gotta say, it's the real deal guys who absorbed the tradition and the legacy of what this music is about, and we're putting it out there. So I feel really proud of that.
Now, we talked about your first album. Let's talk about the second one. What was the name of it? What is the name of it? And how does it differ from the first one?
Well, the second is called Across 110th, Spanish Harlem Orchestra, Across 110th Street, which, again, wasn't my idea, but when I heard it, I said, yeah, that's pretty good.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Yeah, so I'm happy to say we've gotten a lot of critical acclaim with the new CD. It's been out for like a little over 2 months, and it features Mr. Ruben Blades. I was Ruben Blades' musical director for 13 years, and Ruben's one of the most talented people in this business, and has, forged an incredible name as an artist and as a Latino, and somebody I'm proud to have been associated with. And in this case, when the idea was proposed as who should we get as a guest artist, and it was proposed to him, he said, I think it's a great idea because, first of all, he hadn't been singing this particular style of hard driving, rock'em sock'em, knock down the wall style of salsa music, which, it's become really, salsa music has become really commercial, and it's become really lightweight and really, how to explain it?
Salsa monga.
Right, they call it salsa monga, weak salsa, because the way Spanish Harlem records music the old-fashioned way. We record it with everybody together. We don't do music today is recorded with click tracks, which is sad because the essence of what the music is about is the interplay of everybody recording together. So, and it takes really good musicians to be able to do that, and that's the way we record it. And the music that you hear on the radio, the commercial music, is not recorded. They record with a click track, which is somebody hearing this, and they're playing to that one by one, and they each put their sound, which is, that's anti the spirit of what the music should be. So I think that's part and parcel of the success that we've received, which has been, like I said, it's a blessing because I feel it's the way the music should be. It's what the essence of what this music should be. And the fact that we're getting, accolades, it's just gravy on top of everything else. So, Ruben was happy to be part of it. He also said, hey, he had kind of been not so much in the limelight in terms of his own career, and he thought it would be helpful also to him, I think, in a sense. to record with us because of the success that we received from the first record. And obviously it was to our benefit to have him because he's got a huge name. In certain, I tell the people this, in certain circles, people go, oh gee, these are people who really don't know, but I mean, Ruben Blades recorded with them, with these guys? Oh, they must be pretty good. So that's just the way the business is, you know, that's the way it is, and that's a misconception, but the people in the know the deal. So, and we're happy to have him recording with us, and we just did a tour of Europe with him. So, and he's as good as it gets when it comes to his music, there's no doubt about it.
And how did the TV work come, and how did the Sex and the City theme song?
Well, that's just,
Did you all know that he was the writer of the Sex and the City
Today in the
theme song?
paper.
This
well,
is the man.
well,
That's why I asked the
Today in the
question.
paper.
I want to see
I gotta say, the actual writer of the theme song is Doug Cuomo.
Okay.
But me and Doug sat down in terms of conceptually and came up with that particular sound, and I contracted the musicians, and I'm actually playing on it, and all the musicians are musicians that are part of my team. So the Sex and the City theme, beginning and end, is actually a couple of the guys from the Spanish Harlem Orchestra. But I've received a lot of notoriety for it, and I've done commercial work in the past. We're actually, I'm happy to say, I was telling Greg that I just did a commercial that we're filming tomorrow morning, actually, where they specifically asked for Spanish Harlem Orchestra cover girl, the makeup cover girl. They want a Latin music theme, and I did the music for it. I wrote the music, and they loved it, and they're filming it tomorrow, and we're recording the music with Spanish Harlem for it. I mean, I recorded a demo track that they're using, and then we're recording the real music, but they're filming it for television. So that's one of the things I've been fortunate to do, is to do some commercials and stuff like that. And I've done some film work, which is, it's all good. It's all, it's great to be able to work at what I love to do, which is music. And
All I can say is that from a fellow musician's perspective, it's so rare and so wonderful when somebody who comes out of a tradition like Oscar does, and who does things the way that he does it, and with the integrity that he does it, actually has a chance to actually make a commercial success and actually do some things, because 99 out of 100 times it's not that case. And so for a lot of people in the music industry, man, you're a great inspiration and a great accomplisher. I don't care what you say, because that's how we feel about it. What you've accomplished and your humility this evening in the face of this is absolutely astounding.
Well,
so thank you.
thank you.
So we're not finished yet. No. Because we have we like to open it up at every event that we do to our audience. If there's any questions and/or comments, or just anything that you'd like to add, we're more than happy to. Sir.
Thanks for joining us, all of you. I don't know if you mentioned in the beginning, I came a little late. Where can we see it live?
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah, and the website too. We have to talk about the website, because now we're all dying to hear you.
Well, it's SpanishHarlemOrchestra.com. As far as live, man, you just missed a bunch of great shows that we did. We were at Marcus Garvey Park. We were at River East Park last week. But I wish I could invite you tomorrow, but it's sold out. Tomorrow we're playing at Lehman Performing Arts Center. But our next show in New York is South Street Seaport,
When?
September 19th.
And to sort of follow up on that idea,
Go ahead.
you're talking about how commercialized salsa has become and Latin music has become, and so much of it is, mediated, radio, just hits. Is there the live, because you mentioned not playing with a click track, that atmosphere in the studio between musicians that's so important to the Latin swing or to any kind of jazz swing. So that live atmosphere is just as important in the studio, but is there enough of a sort of live scene, a youth? Is there support from the youth that, to keep this kind of live interaction going?
You know what? I have to say, unfortunately, I mean, it's kind of seems like it's dying in a sense, and it's really sad. When the reason we've gone to Europe is because people have a certain, appreciation that's taken for granted here. I mean, it's gratifying to know that tomorrow our show is sold out. It's us and the Gran Combo. Gran Combo is like is a band that is. What can I tell you? They exemplify, salsa music. They've been around for 40 years, and they're one of the great salsa orchestras that exist, bar none. So it's going to be an extreme pleasure to share the stage with them and be able to, have, the beautiful encounter that I'm anticipating tomorrow. It is sold out, so it's gratifying. That means certain people are out there supporting the music. But unfortunately, the youth, they're not being educated enough. I think that they're, the radios, everything has become so commercialized, which is, it's one of the sad things about this great country that we live in, that everything comes down to the almighty dollar, and it really compromises, the integrity of everything across the board. And I think that we as people have to really fight against that, we really do, and we kind of like have to make an effort. And it's sad that happens, but I mean, you have, as an individual, you got to make a conscious effort to, to make sure fighting. I mean, I just do it in my own little way wherever I get a chance, and to put my 2 cents out there in terms of what I feel is important. But the youth is not being educated enough in terms of the music, and the commercial radio is sad. It really is. I mean, some of it, that's not, it's all bad, but I mean, some of it is, it's not, it's fine that they play some of the stuff they're playing, but come on. I mean, you don't hear Ray Barretto, you don't hear Eddie Palmer, you don't hear a Gran Combo, you don't hear Sonora Ponceña, all the great bands, that represent what this music is, should be played on the radio, and you don't hear those bands. It's like, listening to a jazz station. I mean, people criticize, CD 101, which I understand. That's fine that they play that music, but every now and then, come on. I mean, play Bird and play Diz and play the real deal, and give people, the chance to decide and for themselves.
I think what they need is a jazz museum.
Well, you know what? I can't let the moment,
Say it. Good,
I
say
can't
it.
let the moment pass because I had no idea. I said, jazz museum? I never heard no jazz museum. But lo and behold, I came here and I spoke to Loren and Greg, and it's an incredible thing what they're trying to do. I mean, it's way past due. It's something with the rich tradition of jazz. I mean, jazz is one of the most incredible art forms that exist. No doubt about it. I mean, the creativity of these great musicians that, that idiom has created has gone to influence the rest of the world. Every country has jazz. We find jazz musicians as a tribute to the Black Americans here, that started this music. And to not have a jazz museum in, I don't know, but it should be New York, but I mean, to not have a jazz museum is a damn shame.
I just have to mention that there's an American Jazz Museum in Kansas City, and there's Talk in Chicago of one, but there is not a major museum in a major city with anything like the scope of what we're talking about. And I just have to say all that stuff all the time because I gave some interviews in the past where I made the point that there's no jazz museum, and boy did I get letters back saying, well, there is one in Kansas City, but I'll tell you the truth, nobody knows about it. Unless you happen to go to Kansas City, where they also have a great baseball museum for the Negro leagues and all that stuff. They've got great stuff there. Are there any more questions or comments from the audience in the back, sir?
Yes, staying in the same vein with the young people. Stand up. Sorry. As an entertainer, I found that the kids think they don't like it until they get a taste of it. And I know when I've been in shows where I do like Cab Calloway, so it's very high energy and audience participation, Heidi-ho and whatnot. And they love it. And my friend there, Naomi Johnson, when she teaches the Lindy Hop and the Jitterbug and they start to learn it, they go nuts. Personally, I was acculturated by my grandparents who came from the era of the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. And they hit me on to all that wonderful music along with stories about what it was like to be black in America in that time. So I was lucky, that I had it kind of imprinted into my soul. And I just wonder, what can we do as aficionados and professionals and patrons of jazz, of the dance and the music and all the different branches of it as well are represented here today? what can we do to interest the kids who think they don't like it?
Don't tell them what it is. I'm serious.
She's got a point.
I'm fortunate to manage a handful of jazz musicians. I manage Joanne Brakeen, Jeremy Pelt, etc. But we had WBGO is great in that they have the Jazz for Kids program. And I have 6 nieces and nephews, and they know whatever we do, it's always an adventure. Auntie Shanti, what are we doing? Don't worry, it's a surprise. They look forward to it. So I took them to the Newark Museum, and they're like, oh, you gotta hear about your artist again? And then, no, it's not my artist, but it's music. Well, what kind? It's jazz. Oh, that's old people music.
Yes, yes.
But then it was Regina Carter playing, and she's talking to the kids and telling them how she got started, the Suzuki method, et cetera, et cetera. My auntie played the viola too. And, you know, they go on and on. But what happened, the 6-year-old, by the end of it, the 6-year-old was arguing with the 8-year-old. Syncopation, that's not syncopation. Let me tell you what it is. It's, you know. And so if we are so quick to label things, if you don't tell them what it is, just expose them. It's not about having money, not having money. It's not about where you come from. It's where you end up, and it's all about exposure. So I find that if they don't know, just let them hear the music.
You know,
And let
it's
them
true.
decide for themselves.
There's a stigmatization that happens with these words that you put on it, and they may love it if they don't know that it's something that they think that they're not supposed to like, because it comes from way back when. And I can tell you a constructive step that we're taking right now. We could use all your support in this. Is we're working on a program right now to take Mr. Hernandez and Ms. Murdoch and all our other Harlem Speaks guests, our honorees, into the schools. And Greg and I have already had meetings through his good offices with the Thurgood Marshall Academy and with the Frederick Douglass Academy and some other places to get these people telling these stories to these kids. And that's something that we're very, very anxious to do, because I can already just see what's going to happen when they meet Taja.
Yeah, well, I just want to say that I'm so proud of you, a boy from the South Bronx, who's able to go on, because I also came from humble beginnings here in Harlem and in also Spanish Harlem. And my mother used to send me down to get fish at the fish market, get a whole bag for $1 at Corby's on 116th Street in Park Avenue. And La Marqueta, you know, and all of that. So it just shows what great talents and performers, some of them are legends right now, that have come from such humble beginnings. And to go on, and as you did, to go to college. I did it much later because I wanted to dance at an early age, but I did go on in my 50s and got 3 degrees from New York University. So,
Bless you.
see, coming from a humble beginning.
Can you tell us, Oscar, about the experience of King Matwa Hector, about how they come, who was the responsible, are you experienced about that show?
Hector Lavoe was one of the, I guess, well-known popular singers of the 70s. He was a Fanny All-Stars, and he was well-known, I guess, as a singer of the people. And the people could identify, I'm talking about, like, you know, the grassroots people could identify, because he was a humble type of person. And they did a show, and he died a tragic death, unfortunately. He was a heroin addict, and very controversial, lived a very controversial, semi-tragic life. And they made a show, an off-Broadway show called Kimato Hector Lavoe, which I was proud, I gotta say, to be, I was musical director / arranger for that show. And it was extremely successful. It was in a small theater of 200 people, but it would be jam-packed every single night. And it was an incredible story, because I'm sure you saw it, right? I mean, it was a story that made you laugh, it made you cry. It was, and the music was awesome. You know, if you saw it, I mean, I have musicians, friends of mine told me there were only 5 musicians, they said, man, it's amazing. The show, it was so well done. So I was really proud to be part of that show. And I mean, the only unfortunate thing was that it was in Spanish. So obviously it was very limiting. And I think that it's a show, they talked about possibly taking it to Broadway or translating, but there was so much uniqueness about the show in terms of the Spanish language that I think it kind of would have been lost in the translation, some of the stuff. But it was a great, a great thing to be part of too, and something I'm proud of,
Nice, very nice.
Mr. Hernandez, this is really great because going back to the 50s and 60s, I used to dance to the Latin music. I remember being a Joe Cuba, then there was the Pachanga. I grew up with Polito Vega. If you remember Polito Vega on the
Sure.
OWBNX.
Well, he's still on Sundays, believe it or
That's
not.
right. And then I remember the Harlows. Did you mention the Harlow artist?
Larry Harlem.
Larry Harlow.
Larry Harlow, sure.
Orchestra Broadway. And then there was Candido,
Candido.
who I remember. So, and when you mentioned
Shadow
about
Ball
Puerto
Day.
Rico, I remember when you mentioned Broadway, I'll never forget Rita Moreno. West Side Story, and there's the conglomeration of all those stars.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of working with Rita Moreno, which I mean, I'm amazed myself, when you work with these people that you hear of as a youngster,
Right.
and here Rita's on the phone calling me, and like, I mean, so it's really, I can't even tell you. But yeah, that's, you mentioned a lot of great people there, that's for sure. So that's, part of what makes this.
It was so great back then because, Mr. Schoenberg, when we went up to the Catskills, the Pachanga and all the Latin dances were very popular at all the resorts. And even at the Statler Hilton and all the hotels in New York, it was the biggest thing. I remember Latin quarters and all the dance clubs.
Yeah, that's. I think that's a little bit before my time, but that's a great era, though. But I heard all about it. Believe me.
No, it's bringing back memories. Symphony Sid and all the rest.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions or comments before we go, sir?
Regarding the Cape Man, you talked about all the problems that there were and the subsequent closing. Did Paul Simon ever consider filming it and making it available to the public in like a video? Or,
Well, he talked about doing a concert of the Cape Man, and actually they I think approached him to do a PBS approached him, and we spoke soon thereafter it closed. But I think it was contingent on Mark Anthony, who was extremely popular at the time. Mark Anthony wanted, because Mark Anthony was in the show, wanting to do it, and I think Mark had other ideas and he didn't want to be part of it, so I think it kind of died right there, unfortunately. They did film it for archive. Lincoln Center, every Broadway show is filmed for archive purposes. So if you want, you can go see it. I mean, it's not the same as watching it live, but you get a gist of what's happening. And it's a tough thing to see it, because when the show was kind of, I guess, they brought in a new director, supposedly to fix the show, to make it more commercial, because they felt it wasn't commercial, it was too long, and the director they brought just tried to make everything faster, funnier, and whatever, because to fit along the lines of a stereotypical Broadway show. In other words, the show must go on, it's got to be fast-paced, it's got to move, and this was a different show. It wasn't about that, it wasn't rah, 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 ta, 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 it wasn't that, it wasn't that type of show. It was a story, and there was a certain nuance to how it flowed, and Paul kept telling me the tempos are too fast, because the director was saying, no, you gotta move, you gotta fast, fast, fast. And he kept telling me the tempos are too fast, and I'm saying, well, that's what he wants, It's like he's now the captain of the ship, he's saying he's the director. And when I saw it, and I saw it with Paul, he told me, you want to go see it? And I said, yeah, sure, let's go see it. And sure enough, he was right. I mean, it really bothered me that the tempos were so fast, because they were beautiful songs, and as you and those of you who are involved in music, I mean, the tempos of songs are very important. You got to really realize where the best tempo for a certain song is. And if you take it too fast, it doesn't work. If you take it too slow, it doesn't work. Each song has its own uniqueness. So.
May I add that we are at this present point in time trying to show one of the factors about the music and how it all develops into one piece. We're doing something right now with Janet Jackson.
It was we.
We is you don't even know it yet.
You gotta tell us for the record, and
well,
they don't know what you're talking
how
about.
they say sometimes you want to be modest about things and don't want to put things up and out until.
Okay.
But I must point out the magnificent Diamond Red, who is also our fabulous Cab Calloway, and wonderful Mr. Walter Gold, and his hands are in this 100%.
Hands are in what?
In the progress of getting together the three styles of the music.
Right.
You can't wait for other people to do what you need to get done. Start grassroots. That's one of the things you were asking. How can you get these things done? Start grassroots. There's a lot of directors and young people out there who we're working right now with young people down from the LaGuardia High School. Absolutely phenomenal. And you want to see that change inside of music.
Well, you know, one of the things I've learned in this business is that you have everything, you know, first of all, you have to persevere. And it's hard because, you know, it's easy to jump ship and abandon ship and let things go and give up. But I think if you feel, you know, strong conviction, you kind of have to persevere through all the obstacles that are thrown your way, because there's always going to be obstacles. And, you know, that's an important part of surviving the process. And I've also learned that, you know, everything starts with a conversation, kind of. It's amazing.
You start it, we'll
No,
help
you know what? I shouldn't say conversation. Everything starts with an idea. So I've had a friend of mine call me up and say, "Hey, I have this idea to do this, you know, record." And we go, "Yeah, okay, well," and we talk about it, and before you know it, we're involved, and the next thing we know, it's done. And I'm going, wow, this thing started from one particular idea that we sat down and we discussed it and rehashed it and developed it, and boom, you have something it's a tangible thing that you look at and you're really proud of, you know? So, you know, whatever it is that you have in your heart to do, you have to persevere and, you know, stick to it and, you know, try to see it through. And, you know, obviously that's an important thing you're talking about, so. Yeah.
Young people next
Well, we'd like to thank you very much for sticking with it and for persevering and doing all these things that you've done.
Yeah.
And oh, I'm sorry, we have another question in the back. I'm sorry, sir.
It's more like a comment. This is my first time at Harlem Speaks. I'm on your mailing list, and I've been getting these in the mail. In fact, one of my good friends is Melba Joyce, who you had here.
This was our first.
Right, and it's sort of a comment. I didn't know who Oscar Hernandez is, but I'm going to go out and buy your CDs, both of them. It ties in with what all of these people have been saying. This guy, the two ladies there, and so forth. Especially the sort of last comment you made, that we can't wait for other people. You don't know how important even a small gathering like this is. I will leave this place tonight with knowledge that I didn't have before. Not only knowledge that I didn't have before, but stuff that's going to make me go out and do something.
Yeah.
See? And you never know the impact. You know, look, it's not necessarily about hitting the masses. If you get one person who can go out and impact other people, you never know where that might lead. And that's one of the things that we haven't done with our culture. We can complain till we're blue in the face about what they don't do. We can complain about smooth jazz and why something isn't played on the radio. Perhaps, yeah, we need a jazz museum, but we also need a place like WBGO for Latin music.
Yep.
We need to start showcasing our own culture and quit waiting on other people to venerate what we take for granted.
Amen.
But the other thing that we have to do is understand cycles for people. You see, if I want to hear blues, I don't go to Harlem. I go downtown because there are clubs that keep it alive. There are clubs that keep jazz alive. I can't. It's only recently that I've been able to hear jazz in Harlem. Now I can say that that's bad, but you have to look at the cycle and what people do. It's no accident that in our history, Europe kept our musicians alive. Now with technology, what we can do is that we can bridge the divide. So if they're not paying you here, you can get Japan to pay you. You can get this place to pay you, and so forth. Even as you're sitting right here in one place. So what we have to do is embrace the technology and, you know, not fight against the cross currents within our culture, but go with them at the same time, maintaining our integrity. And we can do this because now we have the whole history laid out in front of us. We can go back and look at things and look at the trends and say, okay, how do we do this? How do we do this so that we still preserve it? And when the kids see it, when they really, I mean, get it in their blood, they go, whoa, wait a minute. Is this what they were talking about? And they won't get it unless we keep it alive and expose it to them. So things like this are extremely important because there's nothing like slowing things down and really giving people the understanding of what lies behind something. So, thank you.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. And I wish I could put that in the bottle because that was eloquent, and thank you. And you actually kind of were on the same wavelength because in my closing comment, one of the things that I was going to ask, as I said, we're about to get to Edsel, here's one of our regulars, as most of you are, is that what I was going to ask you was if you could, when you come back to these things, if we could all bring one person with us. That simple act of calling one friend or one loved one, someone that we respect, and say, hey, this stuff is going on and I want to bring one more person. That will do it. That's the one step to do, and that just goes back to your comment. Ed, you were going to say something?
Yes, I want to say that I'm a member of the Creative Jazz Organization, and we have jazz every Wednesday night at Carmichael's Diner in Queens. And we also have a scholarship fund. And believe me, or you wouldn't believe me, that in 3 years' time, we have not been able to find a young high school senior or a young person going into college who wants to follow music. We've been to Louis Armstrong School, we've been to Brooklyn schools of music out there. We've been all over the place, and we talk to people, we invite people, we invite a lot of young people to come down and play, you know, on a Wednesday night, play, you know, a couple of songs, sing whatever. And up to this time right now, October 3rd, we're having another scholarship fund at Ambiance. That's in Queens on Guy Brewer Boulevard, crossing Rochdale. The September 18th, the Brooklyn Old Timers is another organization that gives raises or has an affair every year to raise funds for scholarships for youth.
Well, I got somebody I want you to
really a
meet.
shame.
Well, this is what's so great about this guy, because I got somebody that I want you to meet. There's a young trumpet player, actually, I'll say a student of mine, but he was in a class of mine, but way at Juilliard. Brilliant trumpet player, protege of Wynton Marsalis, who's in the Jazz Museum All-Stars. His name is Chimani Smith. And he knows a lot of the, I'm sure if you talk to him, he would know a lot of the young players. He might be able to find you somebody. And he's right back there. That's Chimani sitting in the back.
So many different people.
And that's Chimani, and you should take a bow because he's played in the Jazz Museum All-Stars. He's one of the upcoming greats, and he might be able to, because he's not a baby himself, but he's younger than he looks, but he's young, and he's probably in touch with some kids that age who might be able to find you somebody to give that scholarship to. And also, I just like to comment again on this gentleman's comment, all the comments and yours, Naomi, about what you folks are doing, because you're actually, as opposed to sitting around and bitching and moaning about jazz and CD 101, you're doing something. And you're out there trying to raise some funds to do something for young people. So
We've had
if
funds.
I had a hat, I'd take it off and say my hat is
We've
off.
had the funds for the last couple of years, and
Well,
we cannot find
let's-
the few kids that come and play for us. Then all of a sudden they back out, they can't do it.
Let's find
You
you
know, we
somebody.
don't want a doctor's child or lawyer's child. We want just a normal working, you know,
Got it.
family
Yep.
that has an interest in music.
We will find you somebody, right?
Oh, we'll find people,
Okay.
trust me.
Oscar, I'm gonna let you make a closing comment if you have anything, and then we gotta wrap it, because I've had the landlord come in twice and just give me the eye back there, because the building has to close at some particular
Just to say thank you, Greg and Loren. Thank you for having me here. And you know what? I mean, it's gratifying for me to do this because it really puts me in touch with what I love, which is, you know, music and why I do what I do. And what can I tell you? I mean, just and with regard to the Jazz Museum, I mean, wow, what can I say? When he showed me the concept of what, you know, it's going to be, it's just an awesome thing. I just said, I mean, if I had a checkbook and I was rich and I was just looking at this, I'll say, just where do I sign the check? Because I mean, it's that's incredible.
We got some brainstorming going on.
And listen, folks, just before we go, and I wanted to stick around because we're going to give our plaque to Mr. Hernandez. I just want to mention our other upcoming events, the ones that I want you all to bring some people to. You know, in every series, we have one person who's a non-musician, but who loves jazz and whose life has been wrapped around with jazz. In our first series, we had Alvin Reed, who owns the Lenox Lounge, and we found out all these things about his life and about how he pays union scale when he doesn't have to, and all the stuff he does. And another gentleman coming up in 2 weeks is a lifelong, I mean, you can sit and talk to this guy like you're talking to a jazz expert, that type. And he was at Columbia University for many years, and now he's running the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone. Our dear friend Ken Knuckles will be here, and I want a good turnout for that. And then after that, wonderful saxophonist who was here tonight, but he has a gig, I guess, so we had a split. Patience Higgins will be here. And then coming up on the 21st, the legendary Larry Ridley, who's the musical director at the Schoenberg, and who, of course, played with Thelonious Monk and everybody else. And also, I want to mention in the audience now, we have one of the cultural leaders here in Harlem. I want to acknowledge from the Human Bookstore, Ms. Clara Villarosa is here. And thank you so much for coming. We're honored to have you here.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna just call right now, and I'm gonna bring a friend.
Thank you.
Well, we're honored to have you here, and we're honored to have everyone here.
I just want to say also that whatever your ideas that you have, you know, with whatever it is you want to do, is to really stay positive. I mean, because, you know, there's enough BS out there that's going to try to knock you down and put you down, and you know what? It's all part of the process, and it's all good. And take it in and just keep going. You know what I mean? That's part of what I meant, you know, persevere in this business. You know, you really have to keep forging ahead despite all of that stuff that you're confronted with. You know, don't get down. Everybody gets down. Understand that it's just the way it is. God bless.
Thank you.
All right.
With our plaque here. Go ahead.